Usually, when we look at the origins of Western thought, we really expect to find this solid foundation,
Right, like perfectly laid bricks.
Exactly. We imagine these ancient Greek philosophers laying down the very first pristine bricks of logic and science. And we think we've just been building straight on top of that ever since.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very comforting narrative. We inherently want intellectual history to act like a neatly organized architectural blueprint.
We really do. We want the clear categories and, the definitive answers.
Right, distinct schools of thought that fit perfectly onto a timeline. But that's just not what's actually there.
No, it's really not. Because when you actually attempt to excavate those foundational bricks, you don't find a clean blueprint at all.
You find a mess.
A total mess. You find a diagnostic landscape that is incredibly murky. It's just scattered, fragmented texts buried under, 2.5 millennia of accumulated theoretical sediment?
Yeah, just layers and layers of interpretation.
Right. And today, for you, the listener, we are embarking on a profound intellectual excavation. We're stepping into this custom-tailored deep dive to examine a genuinely groundbreaking new book.
And this came out recently, right?
June 2026, yeah. It's called Thus Spoke Heraclitus by Michael M. Nikoletseas. And our mission today is, well, it sounds straightforward, but it's actually a radical departure from the academic norm.
It really is a complete upheaval of how we usually do this.
Exactly, because we're going to strip away 2,500 years of philosophical baggage. We're going to entirely ignore Plato.
Just toss him out.
Toss him out. We're ignoring Aristotle, too. We are bypassing literally every modern thinker who used those ancient figures to prop up their own system.
Which is, pretty much all of them.
Right. Instead, we're looking directly at the original surviving signs, the exact words of two towering figures of antiquity, Heraclitus and Parmenides.
And I just have to say, the scale of the intellectual debris that Nikoletseas clears away here, it really can't be overstated.
It's massive.
It is, because in almost every standard philosophy curriculum, these two titans are positioned as irreconcilable poles.
Total opposites.
Right. Heraclitus is traditionally pigeonholed as the philosopher of unrelenting flux, the guy who claimed everything is in a state of chaotic change.
And Parmenides is the other guy.
Exactly. He's presented as the exact antithesis, the philosopher of a static, unchanging, unified reality. They're treated as these arch-enemies of thought.
So it's basically the ultimate either-or scenario for the dawn of human reason. You either believe the universe is a process, or you believe it's a fixed object.
That's the binary we're always given. But Nikoletseas advances this wall-breaking thesis. He proposes that if we strip away the centuries of commentary...
If we stop looking through Plato's lens, basically.
Right. If we take off those glasses, we discover they aren't adversaries at all. By placing their original untempered words side by side, he argues that Heraclitus and Parmenides are actually outlining complementary halves of the exact same reality.
Wow. So they're two distinct modes of grasping the ultimate nature of existence.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to really understand how Nikoletseas pulls off this synthesis, we need to first look at the mechanics of the book itself.
Right. The structure is very unique.
Yeah, because if we're throwing out Plato and Aristotle, how do we actually access the raw data? And the book isn't written as a conventional, dry academic monograph.
Thank goodness.
Right. It's structured as a dialogue between two characters. You have an anonymous seeker, who represents us, the modern reader, trying to untangle these concepts. And then you have the Scribe of Ephesus.
And the Scribe of Ephesus is just a brilliant narrative device. It essentially functions as like an AI persona.
Oh, interesting. Like how?
Well, it's this incorruptible, highly literal translator and archivist. The seeker approaches the scribe with all these modern assumptions, often trying to force ancient Greek concepts into modern academic boxes.
Like trying to use Aristotle's definitions on Heraclitus.
Exactly. And the scribe continuously refuses to engage with those later constructs. When the seeker asks a leading question, colored by Aristotelian logic, the scribe simply lays the original manuscript on the table.
Just points to the text.
Yeah, it provides the precise Greek terminology and forces the seeker to grapple with the raw text.
That dynamic is crucial. It isolates the source material. It forces a kind of cognitive quarantine.
That's a great way to put it.
But to know what the scribe is actually laying on the table, we have to understand how these texts even survived. Because, Heraclitus lived around 500 BCE.
A very long time ago.
Yeah, and he didn't leave behind a neatly bound volume with chapters and an index. He supposedly deposited a single scroll, which is often referred to as On Nature or Periphysios, in the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus.
And that original text is completely lost.
Right. All we have are fragments, something like 100 to 150 short, incredibly dense sentences that were quoted by other ancient writers later on.
And this is where the Dielskrans or DK numbering system becomes the vital tool for our excavation here.
Oh, right. Let's explain the DK system for the listener.
So in the early 20th century, Hermann Diels and Walther Krantz cataloged every surviving scrap of pre-Socratic philosophy. They gave Heraclitus chapter 22. But the real genius of their system is the subdivision.
The A and B sections.
Yes, the A section contains testimonies. So what other people claimed Heraclitus said or believed.
Basically, rumors or secondhand accounts.
Right. But the B section contains the ipsissima verba.
The exact quoted words.
Exactly. The verified voice of the philosopher himself. So when we reference, say, DK 22b12, we are pointing to a specific string of ancient Greek that is undeniably Heraclitus' own words.
So the core methodology of Nikoletseas' book is to exclusively interrogate these B fragments.
Exclusively, because if we rely on the A fragments, the testimonies, we fall right back into the trap of looking at Heraclitus through the distortion field of his rivals.
Right. It's like playing a 2,500-year game of telephone. If we only know Heraclitus through what Aristotle said about him, we're basically listening to a cover band.
A cover band with an agenda.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nikoletseas is giving us the original master tapes. And let's look at the mechanics of that distortion for a second. If Aristotle builds an entire philosophical architecture based on rigid categories and fixed definitions,
And the law of non-contradiction.
right, then a philosopher like Heraclitus becomes a massive structural problem for him.
Precisely. Because, Plato and Aristotle were not impartial historians. They were system builders.
Yeah, their own brands to sell.
Exactly. Plato needed to establish the existence of eternal, unchanging forms, these perfect templates of reality outside the physical world. And Aristotle needed a framework where a subject has distinct, unchanging properties.
So to validate their own systems of stability, they needed a foil.
Yes. They took Heraclitus, stripped away all the nuance of his thought, and reduced him to a caricature. They presented him as a guy who believed in absolute, chaotic, unstructured flux.
Basically saying, look at the absurdity of Heraclitus. This is why you need our neat, orderly systems.
Right. They used him as a structural counterweight to balance their own theories. But by doing that, they effectively overwrote his actual legacy.
Which is why the Scribe of Ephesus in the book is so strict about refusing to let the seeker use Aristotelian terms.
The scribe just won't allow it.
So if we adopt the scribe's strict discipline and we look only at the B fragments, what does the raw data actually tell us about Heraclitus' vision of reality?
Well, to understand the raw data, we have to situate Heraclitus in his proper context. He was in Ephesus, which is located on the coast of Ionia in modern-day Turkey.
A huge, wealthy trading hub.
Very wealthy, very dynamic crossroads of culture. And even among his peers there, Heraclitus was notorious. In antiquity, he earned the epithet the obscure, or the riddler.
And that reputation for obscurity is usually tied to his most famous concept, right? Pantare, the idea that everything flows.
Yeah, that's the one everyone knows.
It's one of those rare philosophical maxims that actually permeated popular culture. You always hear some variation of the river analogy. You can't step in the same river twice.
But if we look at the actual B fragment, DK22b12, the translation Nikoletseas emphasizes reveals a much more precise mechanical argument than just, things change.
Okay, let's hear the actual text.
The fragment reads, "On those stepping into the same rivers, other and other waters flow."
Other and other waters.
Right. The philosophical weight here rests on the relationship between the same rivers and the other waters. Notice he doesn't say there is no river.
He affirms the identity of the river.
Yes, but that identity is entirely dependent on the constant active displacement of the water. If the continuous influx and outflux of new water stops, the entity ceases to be a river.
It just becomes a stagnant pool.
Exactly.
So the flux isn't eroding the identity of the object. The flux is the very mechanism generating the identity.
Which is a massive paradigm shift. He's arguing that stability is an illusion produced by continuous balanced motion.
Wow. And that realization directly dictates his choice of the fundamental principle of the universe, right? The arch.
Yes. Because earlier Ionian thinkers sought a single static foundational element. Thales argued everything was derived from water. Anaximenes proposed air.
They were searching for a primary building block.
Exactly, a block.
Hmm.
But Heraclitus abandons the idea of a static building block entirely. He chooses fire.
Let's look at DK 22b30, where he explicitly lays this out. He says, "This cosmos, the same for all, no god nor man made it, but it always was, is, and shall be. Ever-living fire, kindling in measures and going out in measures."
The mechanics of fire perfectly encapsulate the river analogy, but on a cosmic scale.
Because fire isn't an object. It has no mass in the way a stone does. It's pure, hungry transformation.
It's a continuous process of consuming and converting. It takes fuel and violently transforms it into heat, light, and smoke. Yet despite this violent internal exchange of energy, a flame maintains a distinct shape and boundary.
Ah, so that is why the phrasing kindling in measures and going out in measures is critical.
Yes. The universe is undergoing an infinite, relentless transformation, but it's doing so according to strict proportion. The rate of destruction perfectly matches the rate of creation.
Okay, but that raises a huge question.
Mm.
If the universe is a continuous, violent combustion, what enforces those measures? What acts as the governor on the cosmic engine to prevent the fire from just instantaneously incinerating everything into chaos?
This is where the scribe introduces the seeker to the single most critical and perhaps most misunderstood concept in Heraclitus' arsenal.
The logos.
The logos. Now, that's a term that carries an immense amount of historical baggage.
Yeah, you hear it in Christianity all the time.
Exactly. Later philosophical schools, like the Stoics and later religious traditions, appropriated the term and loaded it with their own meanings. But in the isolated context of the DK fragments, the logos for Heraclitus is the eternal rational principle that steers the universe.
It's the formula of the measures, the hidden proportion governing the fire.
Right. And the grammatical analysis the scribe performs on the very first fragment, DK 22b1, is absolutely fascinating here.
Right. Heraclitus begins his entire work by addressing the logos. But the way he structures the Greek sentence physically maps the concept he's trying to explain, doesn't it?
This is where his mastery of language really becomes evident. The fragment begins. Of this logos which is always, men become uncomprehending.
Okay.
But in the Greek text, Heraclitus employs a specific syntactic structure known as the genitive absolute. Tu de logu, tous eantos e, which translates roughly to of this logos here being always.
Okay, let's break down why that specific syntactical choice matters for the listener. Because if I want to say the dog is barking, I have a discrete subject acting out a discrete verb.
Right, a normal sentence structure.
But a genitive absolute doesn't work like that. It creates a surrounding independent condition that the rest of the sentence operates within.
Precisely. By utilizing the genitive absolute, Heraclitus prevents the logos from being interpreted as a localized object or just some distinct entity operating within the universe.
It's not a thing inside the box.
No, the grammar dictates that the logos is the all-encompassing condition of the box. Furthermore, he takes the verb to be, eimi, and utilizes its participial form, eontos.
Which translates to being.
Right. So he takes existence, which we usually conceptualize as a static state, and renders it as a continuous flowing activity.
So the logos isn't something the universe possesses. The logos is the continuous rational activity that the universe is.
Exactly. But immediately after establishing this all-encompassing rational structure, Heraclitus delivers this devastating diagnosis of human awareness.
Yeah, he gets pretty harsh here. He claims that even though this logos surrounds them and steers all things, men are uncomprehending.
He compares humanity to sleepwalkers. He says they forget what they do when awake, just as they forget what they do in sleep.
Oh, it's wild. If the logos is the very physical and rational structure of reality, how is it possible that the entity experiencing it is completely blind to it?
Well, Heraclitus diagnoses this blindness as a failure to recognize what is common. In fragment DK22b2, he says that although the logos is common to all, most people live as if they have their own private understanding.
They're trapped in their own little bubbles.
Right. They retreat into the localized, immediate data provided by their senses and their unchecked appetites. They perceive a static object, a tree, a rock, a river, and they believe that static perception is the absolute truth.
Completely missing the invisible energetic exchange that actually maintains that object.
Exactly. They miss the fire.
So if the problem is that human beings are trapped in a private, static hallucination, how does a philosopher wake them up? I mean, if Heraclitus believes the world is a continuous dynamic process, that creates an immediate mechanical problem.
Huge linguistic problem.
Yeah. How do you explain a flowing universe using human language, which is built almost entirely on static nouns?
That is the central linguistic crisis of his work. Human language evolved to differentiate and categorize. We point and say, this is day, that is night, this is hot, that is cold.
This is life, that is death.
Exactly. Our grammar is inherently designed to cut reality into discrete, non-overlapping segments. And Heraclitus views this standard use of language as fundamentally deceptive.
Plain speech lies by omission.
Yes. When you name an object with a static noun, you freeze it. You strip away its temporal dimension, its constant state of becoming.
So ordinary language is like taking a photograph of a bird in flight. It captures the bird, but it lies about the motion.
That's a fantastic way to look at it.
So if plain language inevitably falsifies reality by freezing it, Heraclitus has to invent a totally new mode of communication. He can't write a standard instructional manual.
No, which explains why he adopts the method of the sēmata, or signs.
Let's examine fragment DK22b93, where he explicitly states this methodology. He says, "The Lord whose is the oracle at Delphi neither speaks nor conceals, but gives a sign."
Right. The oracle does not provide a direct declarative statement because a declarative statement allows the listener to remain passive.
You just nod and accept it.
Yeah, they just absorb the info without internalizing the mechanics behind it. But the oracle also doesn't outright lie or conceal. It provides a sign, a puzzle, a paradox, a linguistic friction point.
And Nikoletseas emphasizes that Heraclitus intentionally mimics this oracular style. He writes in these incredibly dense paradoxical aphorisms because he believes, as he states in DK22b123, that nature loves to hide.
Physis cryptestai phile.
The deep structure of the cosmos doesn't just sit on the surface of our sensory experience.
And this methodology is deeply tied to who he actually considers his audience, because Heraclitus expresses a profound contempt for the masses.
Yeah, he really doesn't hold back. In DK22b29, he says most people are glutted like beasts.
He is not writing to democratize knowledge at all. He is writing exclusively for the aristoi, the few who are capable of rigorous, sustained intellectual effort.
Okay, I need to challenge this approach, though. By intentionally obscuring his meaning, isn't he just indulging in intellectual elitism? Because if the goal is to reveal the logos, wrapping it in riddles seems totally counterproductive. It creates this artificial barrier. Is he actually trying to illuminate reality, or is he just creating a philosophical exclusive club?
I mean, it is undoubtedly elitist, but we have to understand the cognitive mechanism he's trying to trigger here.
Okay.
The obscurity is not an arbitrary barrier. It's the necessary condition for awakening. When you read a clear, linear sentence, your brain processes it smoothly.
Right, there's no resistance.
Exactly. Heraclitus utilizes the sēmata to introduce severe cognitive dissonance. By forcing two seemingly contradictory concepts together, by creating a linguistic paradox, he forces the mind to halt.
Oh, I see.
The reader cannot passively consume the text. They must actively struggle to resolve the contradiction. And in doing so, the reader actually replicates the tension of the cosmos within their own mind.
Wow, so he uses linguistic strife to reveal cosmic strife.
Precisely.
That actually makes perfect mechanical sense. The friction of the text forces the brain to boot up its critical faculties. And that concept of internal friction brings us directly to the engine of his entire philosophy, the unity of opposites.
This is the core of it all.
How do these sēmata actually map the hidden structure of reality?
They map reality by demonstrating that concepts we perceive as mutually exclusive are, in fact, mutually dependent.
Let's look at DK22b60. The road up and the road down are one and the same.
Right. The physical topology of the incline is identical.
The distinction between up and down is just an artifact of the observer's vector of motion, not an inherent property of the road itself.
Exactly. The opposing concepts are unified by the single underlying structure. This is his method of diarion, of dividing or cutting.
So he makes sharp distinctions, day and night, satiety and hunger.
But not to separate them permanently into Aristotelian categories. He does it to demonstrate that they form a single, continuous, cyclical process.
One cannot exist without the other defining it and eventually transitioning into it.
Which leads us to the most powerful and intricate mechanical analogy in the fragments, DK22b51.
Oh, this is a great one. The text reads, "Men do not understand how what is at variance with itself agrees with itself. It is a backstretched attunement, as in the bull and the lyre."
The Greek phrase palantropos harmonia, the backstretched attunement, is the ultimate key to Heraclitus's physical universe. Let's analyze the physics of the strung bow for a second.
Okay.
To the casual observer, a strung bow sitting on a table appears completely static. It looks like an object at rest.
But structurally, it is in a state of absolute violent panic.
Yes, the flexible wood is being bent unnaturally, and its physical properties are desperately trying to force it back into a straight line, pulling outward.
And simultaneously, the string is anchored at both ends, constantly pulling inward against the resistance of the wood.
The bow only functions as a weapon. It only possesses potential energy because of that unceasing bidirectional warfare between the wood and the string.
The structural integrity of the object is the tension.
Exactly. If the opposing forces stop fighting, if the string snaps or the wood splinters, the bow ceases to exist as a functional entity. The harmony of the bow is entirely reliant on the variance, the conflict, of its components.
And the lyre operates on the exact same physical principle, but applies it to aesthetics. Here's where it gets really interesting. If you tune a guitar, you are literally creating a backstretched attunement.
That's a perfect modern example.
You tighten a string against the rigid neck of the guitar. The tension between the pull of the string and the resistance of the wood creates the specific frequency. Music is born from physical conflict.
This is exactly why Heraclitus makes the staggering claim in DK 22b53 that war is the father of all and king of all.
He's elevating strife from a destructive human endeavor to the fundamental generative principle of physics.
The ever-living fire, the constant transformation of matter, is maintained by this hidden, backstretched attunement. The logos balances the opposing forces, ensuring that the tension remains stable enough to create the cosmos, just as the tension of the string creates the note.
That is just incredible. So, we have Heraclitus giving us a universe defined by kinetic energy, proportional transformation, and the unceasing war of opposites.
A universe of dynamic flux.
But just as Heraclitus is establishing this dynamic physics of the living world, the timeline of ancient philosophy introduces his theoretical counterweight.
Right, the grand pivot.
If Heraclitus forces us to look at the continuous process, our next philosopher forces us to grapple with the logical requirements of existence itself. We turn our attention to Parmenides of Elea.
The shift from Ephesus to Elea is a shift from the physics of becoming to the rigorous, unforgiving logic of being.
Parmenides operated in a Greek colony in southern Italy, right?
Yes, and his surviving work, a philosophical poem also titled On Nature, sent an absolute shockwave through the intellectual world.
Because if Heraclitus utilized paradox to mirror the flux, Parmenides utilized strict deductive logic to obliterate the concept of flux entirely.
Utterly obliterate it.
Let's lay out the core premise that caused this shockwave. What exactly is Parmenides asserting that makes him the supposed arch-enemy of the Heraclitean worldview?
Well, Parmenides asserts that the ultimate reality, what he calls the eon, or what is singular, eternal, continuous, indivisible, and completely motionless.
Motionless, okay.
To establish this, he introduces the two ways of inquiry in DK 28b2.
Right, the goddess in his poem presents these two paths to the thinker.
Yes. The first path is the way of it is, and it is impossible for it not to be. This is the path of truth, conviction, and logical coherence.
Okay, what's the second path?
The second path is the way of it is not, and it is necessary that it not be. Parmenides argues that this second path is utterly impassable.
Why?
Because you cannot know what is not, nor can you point to it or speak of it. Non-being is conceptually and linguistically void.
On the surface, I mean, that sounds like a standard tautology. What exists, exists. What doesn't exist, doesn't exist. You can't analyze empty space.
Right, it sounds simple.
But Parmenides uses that simple premise to construct a terrifying logical deduction about the nature of time and motion, doesn't he?
He demands that we apply this rule with absolute, uncompromising rigor. Let's take the concept of change a seed growing into a tree or, an apple turning from green to red.
Okay.
For change to occur, an object must transition from a state of what it is currently into a state of what it is not yet.
Right.
Furthermore, its previous state must pass away into what is no longer.
But Parmenides has already established definitively that what is not cannot exist and cannot be conceptualized.
Exactly. Therefore, the mechanism of change requires a component non-being that is logically impossible.
Oh, wow.
If non-being is impossible, then coming to be and passing away are impossible. If an entity exists, it must have always existed in its entirety because it could not have come from nothing.
But it can never cease to exist because it cannot pass into nothing. First, I want to make sure you, the listener, grasped the sheer magnitude of what is being argued here. Because I am sitting here experiencing the passage of time. I can move my hand across the desk. I am observing motion.
We all are.
And Parmenides is using pure logical deduction to tell me that my empirical observation is inherently flawed. He is claiming that motion is a conceptual impossibility.
He is.
How does he reconcile this flawless logic with the overwhelming sensory data of the physical world?
He doesn't reconcile it. He dismisses the sensory data entirely.
Just throws it out.
Just throws it out. Parmenides argues that human senses are fundamentally defective. They generate a localized hallucination of plurality and change.
A hallucination.
He calls this realm of sensory illusion doxamortal opinion, or seeming. The world of distinct objects, of light and dark, of birth and death, is merely a biological interface error.
So what's the actual truth?
In true reality, accessed only through pure reason, the eon is a perfectly homogeneous, continuous block of existence. In DK 28b8, he compares this ultimate reality to the mass of a well-rounded sphere, equally balanced in every direction, held tightly by necessity.
So we have reached the ultimate philosophical impasse. On the left side of the table, we have Heraclitus. He argues that reality is an ever-living fire, a dynamic process of tension, and that stability is an illusion.
The flux.
Right. And on the right side, we have Parmenides. He argues that reality is a static, unmoving sphere of pure being, and that process and change are the illusions.
Wait, if Heraclitus says you can't step in the same river twice, and Parmenides says there is no river, nothing moves, it's just a giant unmoving sphere, how on earth can Nikoletseas claim they're complementary?
Yeah, I'm trying to hold these two ideas together, and the cognitive dissonance is intense. How do you synthesize the fire and the sphere?
You synthesize them by recognizing that they're analyzing reality at two fundamentally different altitudes of thought.
What do you mean?
Well, the brilliance of Thus Spoke Heraclitus is how the Scribe of Ephesus lays out the specific Greek fragments side by side to demonstrate that these aren't competing doctrines of physics. They are the two necessary pillars for human cognition.
Okay, and Nikoletseas provides three profound analogies to establish this bridge. Let's examine them systematically.
Let's do it.
All right, let's dive into analogy one. The logos within flux versus the eon against doxa.
So Heraclitus descends directly into the chaotic sensory overload of the world, the doxa, the realm of flux and fire. He accepts the messy, violent reality of constant change, but he seeks the invisible, unifying principle operating inside that process.
The logos is the hidden harmony that organizes the chaos.
Yes. Now, Parmenides approaches the exact same problem from the opposite direction.
Yeah.
He recognizes that human cognition cannot function if it is constantly dissolving into the flux.
Right, you can't think if nothing stays still.
Exactly. To have any coherent logical thought whatsoever, the mind must establish an absolute unwavering boundary. The eon, the what is, must be conceptually isolated from the shifting sands of doxa, otherwise all logic collapses into contradiction.
So Heraclitus is mapping the kinetic behavior of reality, while Parmenides is mapping the epistemological boundaries required to think about it.
That's it, exactly.
If you don't have Parmenides' absolute rule that what is, you can't even construct a sentence to describe Heraclitus' fire.
Right. Which brings us seamlessly to analogy 2, where we see them describing the exact same boundary using different metaphors, the analogy of measure and limit.
Let's look closely at the text for this. In DK 22b30, Heraclitus says the fire kindles in measures and goes out in measures. It has a quantifiable rhythm.
And when we cross the table to Parmenides, we look at DK 28b8. He describes the sphere of being as being held by powerful necessity in the bonds of a limit.
In measures versus in the bonds of a limit.
When you isolate those fragments and read them together, a remarkable consensus emerges. Both philosophers are fiercely rejecting the idea of a chaotic, random, unbound universe.
They both recognize that reality operates within strict, unbreakable parameters.
Yes. Heraclitus conceptualizes these parameters as a living, rhythmic pulse, the measure of the breath, the measure of the flame. Parmenides conceptualizes these parameters as a geometric absolute, the limit of the sphere.
But they are pointing at the exact same underlying truth. Reality is structured by invariant rules.
It's sort of like looking at the speed of light.
Oh, that's a good one. Break that down.
Well, Heraclitus is describing the unimaginable velocity and energy of the photon moving through space, right? While Parmenides is pointing to the absolute unyielding mathematical constant, the limit that dictates the photon can never exceed 299,792,458 meters per second.
They're defining the same phenomenon from the perspectives of energy and geometry.
Exactly.
That is a phenomenal modern analog. And that mathematical constant brings us to analogy 3, because in the ancient worldview, these cosmic parameters are not passive, they are enforced.
Right, the analogy of justice and enforcement.
Let's pull the fragments for this one. For Heraclitus, we look at DK 22b94. He states, "The sun will not overstep its measures, but if it does, the Erinyes, helpers of justice, will find it out."
The Erinyes are the ancient Furies, the agents of retribution.
Now observe the parallel in Parmenides, DK 28b8. He argues that reality cannot come into being or perish because Dike justice has not loosened her fetters. Furthermore, an enke necessity hold it in the bonds of a limit.
So Heraclitus says justice actively patrols the measures of the fire, punishing any deviation. Parmenides says justice and necessity actively bind the sphere, preventing it from dissolving into non-being.
They both rely on the exact same personification of cosmic enforcement to explain why the universe remains stable.
When the Scribe of Ephesus lays these fragments out, the false binary completely evaporates.
It's just gone.
We realize that the history of Western philosophy made a catastrophic error by forcing a choice between the two. Heraclitus provides the vital, dynamic, pulsing energy of existence.
He gives us a universe that breathes, burns, and generates life through the tension of opposites.
And Parmenides provides the absolute, unyielding logical architecture required for the human mind to grasp that existence without descending into madness.
If you strip away Heraclitus and only retain Parmenides, the universe becomes a sterile, frozen mathematical abstraction.
It is logically perfect, but entirely dead.
But if you strip away Parmenides' logic and only retain Heraclitus' fire, the flux loses its governor. The universe becomes a terrifying, incomprehensible inferno of chaos.
They are the ultimate macro demonstration of the backstretched attunement.
Oh, wow.
The philosophical tension between Heraclitus' fire and Parmenides' sphere is the very string that tunes the lyre of human reason. You need the dynamic pull of the flux and the rigid anchor of the limit to produce the harmony of truth.
Which brings us to the profound final takeaway of this deep dive, because this isn't just a historical correction.
No, not at all.
This isn't just about rearranging the syllabus for Philosophy 101. Nikoletseas' excavation of these texts reveals a fundamental diagnosis of the human condition that is as urgent today as it was in 500 BCE.
The tragedy they both diagnosed is that the human mind naturally resists this tension. We are inherently lazy thinkers.
We crave the comfort of the doxa, of mortal opinion.
We want the world to fit into simple, discrete, easily identifiable boxes. Heraclitus called us sleepwalkers, oblivious to the hidden connections.
And Parmenides said we wander two-headed, hopelessly confusing truth with illusion.
They both understood that human language is a trap that continuously seduces us into mistaking our local, temporary perceptions for absolute reality.
So the struggle isn't a historical debate between two dead Greeks. The struggle is the daily internal effort of the human mind to break through the deceptive surface of ordinary language and catch a genuine glimpse of physis, of the hidden nature of reality.
And this book demonstrates that by returning directly to the sēmata, the signs, we can retrain our minds to hold that necessary tension.
We can learn to perceive the world as both a continuous flowing process and a logically coherent structure.
Holding both at the same time.
This has been an incredibly rigorous and illuminating intellectual journey. We began by discarding 2,500 years of academic commentary, bypassing the systems of Plato and Aristotle to access the raw B fragments of the Diels-Krantz system.
We looked at the original tapes.
Exactly. We explored Heraclitus' vision of a cosmos driven by ever-living fire, structured by the logos, and harmonized through the violent tension of opposites.
And then we confronted the terrifying, flawless logic of Parmenides, who demanded that being must be a perfect, unmoving limit.
And finally, through the precise methodology of Nikoletseas' text, we synthesized the two. We discovered that the river of flux and the sphere of reality are not mutually exclusive doctrines, but the complementary limits of human cognition.
A true, backstretched harmony.
As we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a specific practical tool derived from these ancient fragments. We've discussed how both philosophers viewed ordinary language and binary thinking as a trap that puts the mind to sleep.
It's a very easy trap to fall into.
Think about the modern landscape. We are constantly pressured to resolve complexities into simple, mutually exclusive categories. We do it in our politics, in our relationships, and in our self-evaluations.
We assume that if two ideas or forces are in conflict, one must be true and the other must be false.
And that the conflict itself is a problem to be eradicated. But the next time you find yourself paralyzed by a contradiction, when you are caught between the need for change and the need for stability, between opposing viewpoints at work, or between conflicting emotions, apply the Heraclitean concept of the palantropos harmonia.
Apply the backstretched attunement.
Stop asking which side of the contradiction is right. Ask yourself, is the friction between these two opposites the very mechanism that is keeping the system functioning?
Is the tension actually the harmony?
By holding the fire of process and the sphere of logic in your mind simultaneously, you refuse to let language freeze your understanding of the world. You step out of the sleepwalking state of mortal opinion.
You wake up.
Keep questioning the categories. Embrace the tension of the opposites. And above all, stay awake.